Welcome to Stardust Stereo. I'm Parker McPhinney. I'm your host. Today's the 13th of October, year 2005. Today I'm going to talk about Venus entering the zodiac sign of Libra. Now this occurs today at 2:19 p.m. That will be 5:19 p.m. Eastern Time, and if you live elsewhere, you will have to do the math. What I want to talk about is the beauty and the harmony and the elements of design and flowing energy in this chart of Libra's ingress into Venus. Libra will not stay its home planet of Venus for very long, because on November 6th, 7th in some parts of the world, it will enter Scorpio, and that's a whole nother ball game. The thing that we need to know about Venus entering Libra is it creates in the ingress chart a Star of David configuration. And this is absolutely fascinating to me because right now in the world, the peace agreement has just been signed, I believe, in the Middle East. I haven't watched the news in the last 48 hours, so it could have changed. But if it in fact did manage to go through, we're absolutely thrilled that it's manifesting during this period of while Venus is in Libra, because that shows great promise, and also because, ironically, in that chart of the ingress, there is that configuration of the Star of David, which involves two grand trines, one in air, Venus, Uranus, and Pluto, all in air signs, which stimulates the intellect, gives you a terrific sense of originality and breaking outside the box, but yet adhering to the good rules of design. And then the grand trine in water, which is involving the planet Neptune, Saturn, Mars, and Mercury. It's a little wide with that Mercury because Mercury is just at 10 degrees Scorpio. Mars is at 14. Neptune is actually still in Aries, but on the 7th it moves back into Pisces. And of course, Saturn is at 26 degrees Pisces. So we have an out of sign grand trine as part of that grand trine, with involving the planet Neptune, which is imagination and spirituality. It's other things as well. And Jupiter is part of that grand trine in water. So we'll say Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are the key players in that second trine, that grand trine. But these two grand trines create what's called the Star of David, and they imply within this configuration in the chart that this is a period in which much can be achieved, great success, and the chart is filled with the trines and then all the sextiles that create the six-pointed star. And this is a very rare configuration. It does not happen often. So if you followed all that, all you need to know is now until November 6th, 7th, you want to take advantage of this energy. You want to go forth and call on all your design ideas or your capacity to make peace with people that you've not been in mutual agreement with, which seems to be an extreme epidemic in our world right now. I view this period, this very short few weeks, less than a month, as Romanticism revisited. I've spent my own personal time immersed in John Walter House's designs, paintings, which were super romantic. It's the pre-Raphaelite period in the art world. I'm very much infatuated with that period. I'm sure I'm not alone. Everybody has their own form of escapism. For me, it's art and comedy. This would be a period in which you, too, need to find what brings you a sense of ease and calms the waters that have been very turbulent in the world. This particular period is also about establishing harmony through good choices and the power of those good choices. I always say the stars don't make things happen, people do. But the stars will shed light on the area that you will have possible success at now. Today is super busy. It is not only Indigenous Peoples Day, which used to be Columbus Day, but since we live by the universal law that everything is subject to change and will change, we're grabbing the peace vibration as long as we can, for as long as we can. Now, also today, Pluto stations direct. This morning it did. So you'll be able to grab onto your own individual power, and then also the power of the people is going to definitely create some unexpected pathways that lead everybody to new vistas. We also have a quarter moon today at 20 degrees Cancer. The moon squares the sun. That happens at, well, that just happened at 11:13 Pacific Daylight Time. That will just be in effect for a week. That particular quarter moon in this chart is conjunct Jupiter. So it makes big the feelings about security, home, patriotism, food. A lot of people have probably been comfort eating. Certainly in Gaza, as supplies start to flow in, let us pray that they do, people will begin to have a celebration of actually having food and water. Imagine 2 years that this has been going on and the suffering of those people, all the people involved, all the parties. I truly hope that this peace deal lasts and is cemented in good faith, and we can begin to carry on in the world with something beyond war. But I'm not holding my breath. So as we visit or revisit Romanticism in our own life, I encourage you to reach out to those that you fancy and embrace the possibility of goodwill and unusual relationships and relationships based on friendship. Relationships that bring a sense of unity, comfort, exploration, and goodwill. And of course, passion is always super fantastic if you can find it. This ingress of Venus into Libra is about talent. It's about keeping on. It is an aspect, this Star of David configuration, that indicates don't be lazy. When we have an ingress chart of this nature, it's easy to sit back and stare at beautiful paintings all day or watch rom-coms. But what we really want to do is we want to get ourselves motivated to do our own creation. And for that, we need the hard aspects. And luckily, in this chart, there are some hard aspects. Namely, Venus will oppose Neptune immediately. It will also create the energy of realism versus idealism, of my individual way versus the cooperative way. So it creates some tension there in figuring it out. how you're working to create a whole within two individuals, how you're also working to help create something that's bigger than yourself or tied to something that's bigger than yourself. The aspects in this particular chart are as followed. As I just said, Venus will oppose Neptune. Venus will trine Uranus, which brings unexpected and fabulous conversation in relationships and unusual friendships. Sometimes that can manifest by age differences or suddenly realizing you have an intellectual link with somebody that you would have never imagined because you did not truly understand them before. Venus will also trine Pluto. That gives similarities in how we deal with unconscious energy and how we also work within groups because Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius. And Venus will sextile Juno, the marriage asteroid. So I expect a lot of engagements happening before the end of the year. Venus will also oppose Chiron. That happens on November 1st. That's looking at the wounded healer. That's looking at how we heal our wound and help others heal their wound. It's very much about forgiveness. There's a lot of forgiveness that will be needed in the Middle East for them to be successful with all parties involved. On the 2nd of November, Venus will square Jupiter. That is the appetite and what one strives to achieve, maybe a little bit, no, maybe grandly out of reach. So we could say with this, it would be, I'll use the example of saying Gaza, suddenly a new architectural plan of how to rebuild the city is so vast that it's unrealistic and it needs to be cut back. On the 3rd, Venus will in conjunct Saturn, so it will be cut back very fastly. Within 24 hours of after establishing a meeting with some super grand plan, it's brought down to a level of realism by the inconjunct of Venus to Saturn. This could also be when that great new love has a certain compromise with reality that has to be made. Part of the success of the romantic movies of the 1950s is that they were not based on reality. Anybody that's ever been in a marriage knows this. On November 6th, Venus will also in conjunct Neptune. So that first week of November is when we will begin to see the lightheartedness and the intellectual inspiration and goodwill between people start to have slight adjustment, cracks, need to be pasted over a little bit. I actually think that that first week in November is when the peace deal will really be tested. Something may happen to set it back. I hope not. Venus in Libra rules the kidneys. That's the body part. So you want to make sure you're drinking the fluids, the water, the juices, the nutritional drinks that you need. It's really important during this short period before the first week in November, or before actually November 6th, that you pay a special attention to the level of fluids that you're getting. The other thing that I'd like to mention is right before this ingress, Venus was at 29 degrees Virgo, obviously, and that triggered the solar eclipse at the end of September of this year. So since Venus also deals with monetary factors, I'm imagining the markets will rally on the news of the peace deal, but the issue here is we also have enormous debt that needs to be looked at in America, probably around the world, but I know in America our debt and the shutdown is of our government is something that cannot be ignored and needs to be looked at, and is costing many people a lot of uncomfortableness. If you're a federal employee and suddenly have no income, that could be very daunting. If you have services that you rely on because of the government and they are not fulfilled, that's also a huge downer. But we're not going to focus on that. What we're going to focus on is the potential that Venus has triggered that solar eclipse to bring us new awareness of the practicality of how we get to what we desire. Virgo, while Venus was in Virgo, is very practical. It wants solutions to better health. It wants to be the best it could ever be. Then when it moves into Libra, it wants to express the beauty that it has discovered, being in art, in creations, in law. This is also about our law structures. It could possibly involve the Supreme Court in America that are up in airs about some issues. I've just scanned the headlines, and I know there's a lot of talk that our Supreme Court has been bought, or, yes, I think everybody's bought. I don't believe that people are immune to living longevity of integrity if they're in any level of politics. I mean, I know that's a bit of cynicism, but having been on the planet for long enough to watch the whole circus, it is a rarity that somebody is not conditioned by corruption. But today, and for the next few weeks, we're not going to think about corruption. We're going to think about beauty and art and creation and being smitten by somebody and new love and visions of revisited romanticism and how we can live a more poetic and beautiful life. I'm Parker McPhinney. This is Stardust Stereo. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd like to thank my patrons. You know who you are. If you'd like to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/ParkerMcP. And once you are a patron, you will get written material that nobody else gets. It's not released to the public. These episodes are released to the public, but you will get special little tidbits into the inside of the world as Parker sees it. And I want to remind you, you are made of stardust, so go shine.